what's up YouTube? IAQ Josh here on our discrete air quality channel, where we're going to be talking about and comparing mold testing to mold assessment. While the two sound very similar, they couldn't be more different. So let's get to it. All right, so let's first start by discussing mold testing. What is it? How is it beneficial? When should it be used? Mold testing, in its most layman sense, is just that. It is testing for mold/fungi, where it can be beneficial if you're in a situation where you simply need some level of analytical data, which is typically in the form of a third-party laboratory that evaluates mold samples. If you're looking for this analytical data to either prove a case of for or against mold spores being present in either the air quality or on surfaces, this analytical data derived via mold testing can be beneficial. But if you are actually looking to get to the root of the cause, i.e. causation, aka the source, what's actually causing this formation of mold growth? Is it humidity? Is it a roof leak? Is it a plumbing penetration? These are the things that cannot be answered through mold testing and mold testing alone. All right, so now let's get into discussing mold assessment and how it can be beneficial. General disclaimer, mold testing can be a part of a mold assessment. However, mold assessment will typically, and I say typically, not be part of mold testing. And here is the main reason. Your average contractor in the construction industry, in the industrial hygiene industry, your average company that is going out to perform mold testing is going to use very few tools to collect the analytical data that's needed. In its easiest form to understand, if you were looking at price and price alone, you would see a drastic difference in price between mold testing and mold assessment. So sometimes price can actually be a good indicator on not necessarily if you're getting what you're paying for, but ultimately, does it fit into category A or does it fit into category B? Both categories have their benefit. It's just a matter of determining which one is best suited for your needs. All right, so where a mold assessment is going to be hugely beneficial is a situation where you've had long-term sustained water damage, water migration patterns, just indications that you've had areas of wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry. These are prime candidates for having a mold assessment performed. And the reason being, it doesn't really pay you any value to know whether there is or isn't mold. With a little asterisk, there's definitely value there, but for what you're likely looking for in that situation, a mold assessment is going to be much more valuable. And the reason being, it's going to get to the root of the problem. That's the big one. That is the keynote difference between mold testing and mold assessment, is it allows you to get to the root of the problem, so that way proactive implementations can be made to correct the issues at hand. We don't just want to know if there's mold in some instances. We want to know, is there mold? How do I address it? How do I stop this from becoming a reoccurring systemic long-term issue? All right, so now let's bring this down a little bit and put it in a format that anyone and everyone can understand. Let's do some visual representation. So on this side of me, I've already laid out what instruments are commonly used for a mold testing service. On this side, I've already laid out what instruments are commonly used on a mold assessment service. So let's talk about the two. All right, so let's dive right into the mold testing service. So during your atypical mold testing service, you would normally have an individual or a company of individuals show up with a number of instruments that look like this. It may be one or more depending on the size of your home, the size of your business, the scope of service, etc. This gem right here is a bioaerosol sampling pump. What this does is this takes these spore trap cassettes, and they are just like they sound. They're designed to actually draw in air from the top of this cassette and there is a sticky pad inside of here which essentially traps the spores, thereby spore trap, and then this sample is then taken to a laboratory. This is analyzed by a microscopist, and using direct examination under a microscope, they're going to be able to tell you what genus or genera of mold is actually present, as well as what is the quantitative value that they read in that slide, and they give you an estimated value per cubic meter. Now, sort of the same idea with these two instruments right here. We've got a tape lift sample, we've got a swab sample. Both of these are used to procure surface samples looking for mold and fungi. Sort of the same process, taking a sample off of a piece of drywall that looks like it has mold present, the inside of a cabinet that has some foreign substance that we want to confirm or deny if it is mold. Both of these produce the same result. They go to the same laboratory more often than not, and they're also analyzed using direct examination, and they're looking at the slides as well and providing you with that analytical data. All right, so now let's talk about mold assessment and what makes it different. For starters, you're gonna notice there is a lot more instrumentation on this side over here, and that's for good reason. But let's first talk about some of the commonality between the two. Right off the bat, we've got a bioaerosol sampling pump, identical to this one over here. We've got a swab and tape lift, again, identical to this one over here. Because we use these devices to collect mold and fungi samples, and because this is an industry accepted form of collecting or procuring these samples, you're almost always going to see these type of instruments on both the mold testing side as well as the mold assessment side. While not required as part of a mold assessment, it can be beneficial in providing, again, that analytical data that may or may not be needed. Now, that said, you're also going to notice some other new instruments on this side. You're going to notice a non-penetrating or surface moisture meter. You're going to notice a penetrating moisture meter. The difference between the two is just as it sounds. One goes right on the surface, the other one has two little pins that actually penetrate the wall. You also have a thermohygrometer, and what this is going to be beneficial in is providing us that data as far as temperature, relative humidity, what's the dew point, how many grains per pound of moisture do we actually have present in the air. All of these paired with a quality visual assessment. Let's not forget about our old trusty flashlight here, but all of these tools and instruments, again, paired with an individual that actually knows what they're doing, why they are there doing that, and the key components of what they're looking for is going to make for an amazing final report, as well as a well-written mold remediation protocol that could be then passed on to any licensed mold remediation company. And simply put, they have to go in, follow said directions, and if all goes well, it should be smooth sailing. So now that we know a little bit about both services, let's make sure that we kind of bring this back in here. Let's not show favoritism toward one side or the other. Let's instead point out the pros and the cons, as well as the differences to both sides. Mold testing, pro, right off the bat, very affordable. Probably one of the most affordable services that you will find within the mold-related services industry. That said, what you won't get with this is identification of what the cause or the source of your problem or issue, as much as we hate to use those words. What is the overarching reason that you contacted a mold company in the first place? This likely isn't going to be able to provide you that data. That said, it's still very economically priced, and if you're just looking to prove a case of whether there is or isn't mold, possibly in a tenant and landlord dispute, this may be sufficient for your needs. That said, if you're actually looking to get to the root of the problem, maybe you've got a lot more of a comprehensive issue. Again, we talked earlier about long-term systemic damages. Mold testing isn't going to get you that. It's going to give you a is or isn't. This is going to get you the who, what, where, and why. Even the whens, potentially. That's a tricky one. All right, so now let's discuss the differences between the reporting when it comes to the two services. When you look at the mold testing side, oftentimes, not always, the contractor that comes out to your home to perform the acquisition of the mold and fungi samples is going to send these off to a laboratory. The laboratory is then going to produce a report based on what was seen under that direct examination. That report is going to be sent over to the contractor. That contractor oftentimes will then forward that email to you. So now when it comes to the consideration of, is this laboratory report sufficient for your needs, just ask yourself this question. Are we playing by golf rules? Are we playing by basketball rules? Is the higher number better? Is the lower number better? In theory, we don't want to have any mold in our house, so shouldn't we want to have a 0? Will you ever get a 0? Well, no, unfortunately, because you live in South Florida. But that said, relatively speaking, you want to have nice low numbers on that laboratory report. That said, unless you're trained to know what you're looking at and be able to interpret what's on that report, which, might I add, is the job of a licensed mold assessment contractor, you might be a better candidate for a mold assessment. So now when it comes to mold assessment, you are going to be receiving a wealth of information within any reports that come and stem from a mold assessment. You're going to know why the mold is there, where the mold came from, how do we stop the mold from coming in, potentially what are the levels of mold that are within your home. This is all valuable information. What you're also going to get on top of that, but wait, there's more. I know, you were all waiting for it, right? Is you're going to have a mold remediation protocol, which is hugely valuable if you've ever collected an estimate from a mold remediation company in South Florida. You know what I'm talking about. You're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. You damn well better be sure that you are verifying that the work that they're saying needs to be done does indeed need to be done. How do you do that? A mold remediation protocol is basically what keeps all of these companies in check, keeps everyone in line. The only factors that should sway or differ between the two is going to be price point, and that's usually based on overhead. The one thing you should not have when you provide a mold remediation company with a mold remediation protocol is going to be differences in scope of work. This wall should come out, which means this wall should come out, which means this wall should come out. All three of these estimates, should you have collected 3, should have the same wall coming out. Why? Because we said the wall needs to come out. So, that said, make sure that when you are wanting to verify exactly what you're dealing with, how you're dealing with it, and ensuring that you're no longer dealing with it in the future, mold assessment is definitely going to be the service you want to look to. All right, so now that we know a little bit about mold testing, or a little bit more, I should say, mold testing and mold assessment services, I do encourage you, the viewer, if you have any questions that seem to have not been answered or covered within this video, please drop a comment below. We do love likes. If you liked it, you got everything you needed out of it, would definitely appreciate that thumbs up button right there. Do also feel free to share this video with your friends, family, colleagues, contractors. If you're looking to distinguish yourselves from others out there, hey, this may be the perfect video for that. At any rate, IAQ Josh, signing off, Discreet Air Quality. Love y'all.